Week 6 is here. The Cleveland Browns are back home at First Energy Stadium to host the undefeated Denver Broncos and Peyton Manning. The Peyton Manning who has never lost to the Cleveland Browns. Welcome to the Dawg House, your inside look at the Cleveland Browns. I'm Andy McNamara alongside Browns insider from WKYC Sports in Cleveland, Matt Florjancic. Make sure to get us on Twitter at AndyMC81, at Matt Florjancic. Email the show, thedawghouseshow@gmail.com. Dog, of course, spelled D-A-W-G. And our Twitter question, we want to hear from you. Score prediction for this weekend. Can the Browns make it 2 in a row? Can they do it? We want to hear your score prediction and why for the Browns or against the Browns. Again, at AndyMC81, at Matt Florjancic. Matt, how are you feeling coming off this win, getting ready to host Denver?
Guardedly optimistic.
Okay.
I'm happy with some of the things that were done. I took it into the context that there were a lot of injuries on the Ravens side of things, so I tempered the excitement because Denver, although DeMarcus Ware may or may not play, they still are a lot healthier than the Baltimore Ravens are, and that could be a bit of a challenge considering they're the NFL's top-ranked defense.
Yeah, that's going to be tricky. Now, they are going to be without DeMarcus Ware. However, they're still very deep. Von Miller up against Mitchell Schwartz. Can Josh McCown escape the game without injury? That is such a key matchup to me now on the injury front for the Browns too, Matt. We know Joe Hayden, going to be out. Deshaun Gibson, out. So you have 2 Pro Bowlers missing right there. That means a lot more time for Pierre Desir, who I thought looked pretty good, and Jordan Poyer, who played well last week. But again, we have to remember, as you said, that was against a depleted Ravens staff on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, it was, and missing two fourths of your secondary is never a good thing. It's never it's a horrible thing actually going into a game against Peyton Manning, who's struggling, and with Jordan Poyer getting more reps at safety. I like the young man. I think he's a little bit away from being an impact player in this league, or at least having the skills to be a quality starter. I remember when he played against the Patriots a couple years ago, it did not end well for Jordan. He made a couple of mistakes that ended up being New England Patriot touchdowns in the final minute and a half, and Tom Brady eked out a victory for New England on a day where he lost tight end Rob Gronkowski early. So I'm a little hesitant to see him go up against another quote-unquote elite-level quarterback in Peyton Manning, but hopefully the young man has grown since then, and he'll be able to do some positive things for the back end of this Browns defense, because they're going to need him to if they hope to contain Peyton Manning and keep those struggles continuing for the 18-year pro.
Well, Matt, how about this? This comes from the official Browns media release. I found this very interesting. Since the AFC North was formed in 2002, only Butch Davis and now Mike Pettin, the only Browns head coaches to beat the Bengals, Steelers, and Ravens. How sad is that? But good for Mike Pettin, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have on your resume, but I think it's kind of, it's expected that you're going to be able to beat your divisional foes if you plan on staying around. That's why most coaches who don't win in the division find themselves exiting quickly, the lone exception being the Raiders a few years ago when they won every game in their division and then won 2 out of their other 10 games, finished 8-8 and missed the postseason. So I congratulate him on getting that victory against the Baltimore Ravens, but if you win 3 divisional games in 2 years' time out of a possible 12, 25% isn't going to cut it, and you might not want to celebrate that because you might be on your way out if you draw attention to that point.
Well, you don't want to celebrate anything if you're the Browns, and I think it's a lot easier not to, quote-unquote, read your own press clippings like they did after the Tennessee Titans game when the next man up, the next opponent up, is the Denver Broncos, undefeated at 5-0. It doesn't matter how Peyton Manning looks at this point. They're still 5-0, best defense in the NFL. How about this? With the Browns and the Broncos records in relative recent history, Broncos have won the past 10 meetings 19-5 all-time in the regular season. Cleveland's last victory against the Broncos, a 30-29 win in Denver on October 8, 1990. And, of course, Matt, we know all about the playoff history between these two clubs. And, John Elway, we don't need to go there, but this is a franchise historically that has had the Browns number. So, looking ahead to today's, or I guess Sunday's matchup, let's look at a couple areas of positivity, perhaps, for the Browns, and cautious optimism. Okay, we're going to do a segment we call Stock Up, Stock Down, where we take a topic and see if the stock is rising or if the stock is falling. So for the Browns, their defense, Matt, after the late fourth quarter and overtime stops to win in Baltimore, is their stock up or is their stock down?
Stock down. Truthfully, Baltimore ran at will against this team up until Justin Forsett got hurt, and then all of a sudden they couldn't run the ball, and when they were very one-dimensional with young, inexperienced wide receivers that were basically signed off the practice squad, Joe Flacco caught a lot of heat and wasn't able to do the drive. And although they did win the game, I think you have to take that into account that they we're playing a bunch of practice squad players and a third-string running back, and I wasn't all that impressed with the fact that they still gave up 30 points.
Matt, I'm going to say stock up. Stock up, because that bit of confidence that the Browns defense could have built upon, I think, is notable. And are they out of the woods? Am I impressed overall? No, but I think the stock up, because you couldn't really fall any further than this defense could. Last and pretty much pick your category.
You could.
You could fall further?
Yes, you could.
How? They're last against the run.
Well, they're last against the run, and they're 31st overall, so there is still one more spot to go. They can fall further.
Always the optimist, Matt. Always the optimist. Okay, but I'm going to say up regardless, because when they gave up all those runs on the ground, yards on the ground, but when it mattered, when you needed them to actually make a stop, I was shocked. I thought for sure they were going to give that game away, and they stood tall. So I'm going to say stock up for the Browns defense. Now, number 2, Peyton Manning, 5-0 this season, undefeated, but his stats are his worst since 1998. Stock up or stock down on Peyton Manning?
Stock down so far. Peyton Manning has not looked very good this year, and at times he's looked like age has finally started to catch up to him, and so have the injuries. But we'll see what he can do this week against a beat-up Brown secondary. It'll be a true test regardless of who was playing, and with the guys that they will have out of the lineup, it'll be even more of a test. So it's stock down right now, but it could shoot way up come Sunday afternoon.
And for me, I'm going to say stock down as well. I'm going to agree with you there, Matt. I think it's, as far as the individual, now I will say this. If the game's on the line and Peyton Manning, it's tied or close, and Peyton Manning has the ball last, and he needs to get into field goal position or get a touchdown, I am still terrified of Peyton Manning, the cerebral assassin, the Triple H, if you will, of the NFL, Matt. Okay? But overall, it's so clear he has physically declined in his skill set. Also, that offensive line is so decimated with injuries. They're getting no push on the running game, and more importantly, the center and really most of the linemen are being pushed back so much so that Manning cannot step into his throws. He doesn't have the arm power anymore to throw off his back foot if necessary. So if the Browns, if somehow they can get Danny Shelton, Randy Starks, if he ever does anything, or Xavier, whoever, to get pressure and actually push the pocket back, that could be a real game changer for the Browns, I think, on this one. As far as the edge rush, Matt, we've been scratching our head, pulling out hair over their lack of quarterback pressure. Do you see them dropping Paul Kruger back in coverage as much as they did last week, considering how much of a gong show that was?
They don't have a choice. They still have
just
decided to run him at strong side linebacker.
Why?
With Scott Solomon being placed on injured reserve, they believe that Kruger is the best athlete that they have at that position to do what they're asking him to do. In having a discussion with another media member this week, actually 2 media members this week. I said, the thing that they need to do is they need to get Kruger back in his more natural weak side pass rusher.
Yeah.
And somebody said, well, what do you do at strong side? I said, well, it doesn't matter right now whether or not you have somebody experienced or not at strong side, because Kruger is your strong side backer as of right now, and he is struggling mightily in that situation. So give somebody like a Nate Orchard or a Barkevius Mingo a shot and see what they can do in that strong side position, while also giving Kruger his opportunity to rush the passer, because by moving Kruger over, you basically created 2 holes, because he's not setting the edge on the strong side, and they get 0 pass rush off the other side. So why make your defense weaker by moving him over instead of just keeping him at weak side? And then I got into another discussion this week about them using Tank Carter on defense rather than Christian Kirksey exclusively on defense, because they know, in Jim O'Neill's words, this is exactly what he said, we don't want to take away Kirko's reps on special teams for defense, because we know special teams is going to have a big impact in how we win games. I hear that, and I understand that, but that's the same logic that Ray Farmer uses not to draft a wide receiver, because they only impact the game 10 times. Well, special team only impacts the game probably a handful of times in a game compared to the 70 defensive snaps that you're going to have to play. So in my opinion, it's asinine to be using a better athlete on defense only for special teams and a better special teams player more on defense. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's the decisions that they're making in Berea right now.
Matt, that just goes to the continuous overthinking, the trying to outsmart people mentality that we've seen out of this regime. Sometimes the obvious answer is the right one.
It's the answer.
It's the answer. Now, what about putting Armonte Bryan on the right, on the strong side? He's got 3.5 sacks. He's looked dynamic at times. Does that make sense?
It would make sense to me to move anybody into that spot that can be productive and have Paul Kruger do what he does best by switching him back over. Armonte is talented enough where he can drop in the coverage, but he can also get after the passer too. So you could have 2 edge rushers instead of just one. And in that situation, I like that a hell of a lot better than seeing Paul Kruger continuously drop into coverage and being asked to do what he's not capable of doing.
Yeah. Yeah, right? Like, it's really strange to me, and I don't think playing Paul Kruger on less snaps is the answer, which is what they did last week. Like, that baffles me, too. Put guys,
him too. He wasn't happy about it.
Put guys in positions.
Yesterday and said it was a lot different than what he expected.
Really?
He's not going to make a big deal about it now because he wants to see how it plays out. He understands that they're trying to keep him in a rotation and keep him fresh, but he doesn't understand why all of a sudden against the Baltimore Ravens, his former team, the team that he's going to try to prove something against, did they cut his reps so severely.
Like, and keeping guys fresh is fine if you're seeing success. You have fresh guys still unable to get to the quarterback. And Peyton Manning is not going to run on you. You know where Peyton Manning is going to be. He's going to be in the pocket, standing there, waiting, daring you to come at him. Because if he doesn't get that quick release, if you can take away that first read, you might have time against that injured offensive line. So I'd be sending the house, Matt. Get on him. Pressure the man. Collapse that. Like, this is a game to me with how poorly that offensive line for Denver has performed is really a statement game. Because if you cannot pressure Peyton Manning in this game, if you cannot stop the running game, who, by the way, Ronnie Hillman and C.J. Anderson, how many fantasy league drafts were busted by guys saying, I got Anderson in the first or second round. They have an average, 70.5 rushing yards a game? Good Lord.
Yeah, it's not been pretty, but the cure-all to that is playing a team that cannot stop the run.
I know. But, Matt, okay, I'm just thinking, if this for the defense, if C.J. Anderson and or Ronnie Hillman go for 100-plus yards, heck, if they combine for 110 yards or more total, there is no hope then for that run defense, because this is the worst run team in the NFL because of what I said.
This is where somebody has to do something, because if they're both the